All right. All right, everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ty Markman, and I'm a senior in the College of Arts and Sciences, double majoring in political economy and computer science with a minor in statistics. Thank you for joining us this evening for Geopolitics' speaker series, Know Your Power. I first became involved with geopolitics as a first-year student when I participated in the pre-orientation program, Campaign Boot Camp. I have continued to be involved as a student leader of Campaign Boot Camp over the last couple of years, as well as attending a variety of geopolitics events. On campus, I'm happy to be a Fritz Family Fellow, a program put on by Georgetown Tech and Society that aims to create interdisciplinary knowledge of the social impact of technology. My project involves researching how data accessibility in the criminal justice system impacts political participation. Along with other organizations, I'm also a member of the performing arts group Groove Theory, Georgetown's premier hip-hop dance group dedicated to the idea of dance as a form of self-exploration and as a tool for challenging predefined boundaries. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce artist and activist John Legend. John Legend is an EGOT-winning, critically acclaimed, multi-platinum musician who has garnered 12 Grammy Awards, an Academy Award, a Golden Globe Award, a Tony Award, and 3 Emmy Awards, among others. Legend is one of only 19 people in the prestigious EGOT Club and has released 10 celebrated albums over the course of his career. In 2018, he starred as Jesus in NBC's Jesus Christ Superstar Live in Concert. That year, he was nominated for an Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Limited Series or Movie and won an Emmy as a producer in the Outstanding Variety Special Live category for the show. He joined The Voice as a coach for season 16 in 2019 and has returned for a number of seasons, including this year's season 25. Beyond his music career, Legend is a principal of Get Lifted Film Company, a production company which has developed projects featuring diverse filmmakers and inclusive casts with major networks including ABC, NBC, Fox, HBO, Showtime, Netflix, and FX. Aside from film, TV, and theater, Get Lifted has partnered with Zando to form Get Lifted Books, which builds upon Get Lifted Film Company's mission of spotlighting stories from dynamic creatives. As an activist, Legend launched Free America in 2014 to change the conversation surrounding criminal justice policies and to end mass incarceration. He also serves on the board of directors for Harlem Village Academies and Management Leadership for Tomorrow, and on the advisory boards for the Quattrone Center for Fair Administration of Justice at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School and Teach for All. Tonight, John will be joined by Mo Alathe, Geopolitics Executive Director. Following his conversation with Mo, John will take questions from students. Make sure to join the conversation on social media by tagging @Geopolitics. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Mo Alathe and John Legend.
Thank you. I constantly walk out here trying to replicate that swagger, and I just can't pull it off, John. Boy, it's Saxa, everyone. Love this crowd. It's great to see so many friends of Georgetown here, so many friends of the Institute, so many friends of John. Senator LaFonza Butler from California, I believe, is here. Senator, nice to see you. But most importantly, it's great to see so many students here. At the Institute, we launched this series, Know Your Power, a few years ago. Because as the Institute of Politics and Public Service, we're constantly driving home the fact that there's lots of different ways to serve. Public service can take many different forms. And so the goal is to bring barrier breakers from different industries to campus to talk about their path to activism, to advocacy. So John, welcome to Georgetown.
Thank you, Mo. It's great to be here. Great to see all of you here.
I want to start exploring your path. When you were about 15, I think it was, you wrote an essay, part of a national essay competition.
Yes.
The title was How I Plan to Make an Impact on Black History. Mm-hmm. And if
You didn't tell them who the sponsor was.
It was McDonald's. Right?
McDonald's,
Yeah.
Ronald McDonald sponsored us.
And I want to read just one paragraph from your essay. I plan to impact society by developing my own character and being a leader in the community by example. I plan to use my social skills and my musical talents to be a positive role model for my fellow Afro-Americans. I envision a successful musical career that will allow me to obtain high visibility in the community. This, in turn, will put me in a position of great influence, which I will utilize in order to be an advocate for the advancement of blacks in America. So my first question is, so how's that working out for you?
I wrote that when I was 15, and you know, my father showed that to me several years ago, and I hadn't thought about it in a long time. For decades, I hadn't thought about it. And when he showed it to me, I was like, wow, I had forgotten that I believed that and knew that about myself and was aspiring to that even as a 15-year-old. But obviously, a lot of my aspirations have come true, and I'm truly grateful for that. But yeah, it was quite moving for me to see that, you know, 20 or so years later, after I'd written it, that so much of what I wanted to do back then has come true.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the journey. When you graduated college, not Georgetown,
School up the road.
Yes, up the road. When you graduated from Penn, you didn't immediately begin to pursue your musical career. You went into consulting.
Well, it was parallel. So I was making music when I was in college. I directed an a cappella group, but I was also directing a church choir. And so I was making music all the time. And then I was also writing some of the early songs that started to form, you know, what I thought my solo career could look like as a musician. And then at the same time, I got an opportunity to play on The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which was being made as I was a junior at Penn. One of my good friends who was in my choir at the church I was working at, she had grown up with Lauryn Hill and wanted me to meet her. So she brought me to a studio over in the Newark area in New Jersey, and we sat, we hung out. I watched Lauryn and her collaborators creating a song, and during a break, my friend Tara said, Johnny, you got to get on the piano and show her what you can do. So I sat on the piano and played a couple songs for her, and Lauryn asked me to play on the record they were working on then, a song called Everything is Everything. So that was my first major credit, was while I was still at Penn, playing piano on Everything is Everything. And after I worked with Lauryn Hill, that was like my claim to fame. I went back to school and I was a senior, and everybody was listening to this album, and I would tell everybody who would listen, that's me on track 13. I played piano on this album, and I started making demos for my own solo career, working with producers, some of whom went to school with me, but also some of whom I met from working with Lauryn Hill. And so these different producers were working with me, helping me write songs and help me develop my music. But at the same time, I'm graduating soon and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, and I wanted to make music for a living, but also needed a day job. I didn't have parents who could take care of me. I had loans to pay back, and I'm sure some of you know what that feels like. It's only gotten more expensive since I graduated, and I needed a day job, so I ended up applying to the same kinds of jobs my Penn friends were applying to, and I got hired at BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, and I worked there for 3 years after college.
So I want to sort of connect this journey back to what you wrote in the essay. Look, there are a lot of artists who focus on their career. They focus on the artistry, they focus on the music, they focus on everything that comes along with that.
Yep.
What motivated you, even before you started, what motivated you to use your talent for advocacy?
Well, part of it has to do with who my role models were and are. And I was very interested in history as a kid. When I would go to the library, I was especially attracted to people who stood up for our civil rights in this country. So I was very attracted to the stories of people like Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Fannie Lou Hamer and all these different organizers and activists who fought so that we could finally achieve equality in this country. And they fought for voting rights, they fought for workers' rights, they fought for desegregation. And I looked up to these people even as a young kid. So partly those were my role models, so activists, civil rights activists to be exact. And then I also looked up to musicians who used their power and their platform to help inspire and enable those activists. So I looked up to people like Harry Belafonte and Nina Simone and Aretha Franklin and Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, who not only made music that was the soundtrack for a lot of these marches and protests, but also used their platform and their resources, their success in the industry to turn around and help the activists. So Harry Belafonte not only showed up and sometimes performed at these events, but he funded them and flew Dr. King where he needed to go and bailed him out of jail when he needed to be bailed out of jail. Aretha Franklin did the same thing. Dr. King was friends with Aretha's father, Reverend Franklin, and she was very tapped into the civil rights movement and helped fund it and support it in any way that she could. And so all of these artists that I looked up to believed that it was about more than just making music, that part of their role was to, in their art, reflect what was going on in the world, but also with the resources and the platform that they were able to attain, they made sure they used that platform to actually make a difference in the world. And so I always believed that's what an artist was supposed to do. That's what my heroes did. And so it only seemed natural for me to do it too.
I want to get to the stuff beyond the music in a moment, but let's stay on the music for a second. You talked about Aretha, you talked about Harry Belafonte, you had Bob Dylan, who was out there using his music to speak out against the Vietnam War. There's no shortage of folks out there.
Sure.
And of course, all of your music is amazing, but Glory.
Yeah.
Right? And I think you are now sort of in that category of folks. I'd love to hear your thoughts, one, on why music is such a powerful tool for advocacy, and two, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the story behind Glory.
Yeah, so let's start with the story behind Glory. I was touring in the UK, and I got a call from my friend Common, and Common was acting in the film Selma, and he was spending time with the director of the film, Ava DuVernay, and they were in the edit for the film, and she was like, we need that song that's going to anchor this film and help us kind of close the film with a moment, a musical moment that will really, hammer home the message. And he called me up and said, I thought of you first, I want to do this with you. And he started suggesting titles for a possible song we could do. And one of the titles he suggested was Glory. And I said, I like Glory. I want to write something called Glory. And so I just, like I always do, hummed something in my phone that I thought could kind of lead me in the direction of what the song would be. And it was a version of what the chorus ended up being. And then I went to the studio in London and recorded the piano and the vocal and sent it back to Common. And he loved it, Ava loved it, and he wrote verses for the song. And as you'll hear if you listen to the song or if you read the lyrics, you'll see that we wanted to be very explicit about connecting Dr. King's movement in 1965. Recall that this was specifically a march for voting rights in 1965, Selma to Montgomery to Selma, and the whole idea behind what they were trying to do and what they were trying to accomplish during this time was to get a Voting Rights Act passed. And so they understood that the power of demonstrating, creating a spectacle, protesting, sometimes risking physical harm to themselves. That was all part of their storytelling to make the nation feel a sense of urgency around these political goals that they were trying to attain. And so the goal in this particular march was to create a sense of urgency to pass the Voting Rights Act. Lyndon B. Johnson was the president, and I think President Johnson wanted to do this, but he needed that people power to fuel the political side of things so that he could convince enough of the legislature to pass this act. And he was able to do so in large part because Dr. King and everybody who marched with him, including the late Representative John Lewis, were putting themselves on the line to pass this Voting Rights Act. So if you watch the film, it's the story of that particular moment in history. And so we were writing the song in response to that moment, inspired by that moment, but this was also 2014. So 2014 in America, recently Michael Brown had been killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri, and people were marching through the streets with their hands up. And so you listen to our lyrics, we reference Dr. King, but we also reference the people protesting in Ferguson. And what happened with that song, we wrote the song, it was a really inspiring and galvanizing song to end the film with, but eventually all those protesters that encouraged us and inspired us to write this song and to include the modern day movement for Black lives in the song, they started marching with our song after the song came out. So there was this symbiosis between what they were doing that inspired us and then what we created that also inspired them.
You have gone beyond the music in your advocacy. You've set up a number of organizations focused on certain issues, and I want to talk about them a little bit, but really the motivation behind them. Human Level, an organization that tackles systemic racism by championing local change. Free America, which really focuses on changing the conversation around mass incarceration. Get Lifted Films, a film studio that elevates underrepresented voices. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, one, how do you identify the causes, the issues that you want to put your voice behind, and two, a little bit about why these issues specifically.
So how do I identify what I want to focus on? A lot of it's just through reading and paying attention to what's going on in the world. So sometimes I'll read a book that really inspires me, sometimes angers me, makes me more passionate about something. Reading The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander made me more laser focused on the issue of mass incarceration and thinking about how I could make a difference in that conversation, and really directly inspired me to form Free America. And then as we continue to advocate for decarceration, part of what we were able to see through listening and learning from different activists in the field, different thinkers in the field, was how important the local government was for a lot of these conversations. I know we're in the midst of a presidential election, but
we're going to get to that.
We'll get to that, I'm sure. But sometimes all of us forget how important our local officials are in determining our futures and the conditions that we live in so many ways. And particularly when it comes to education, so much of the policy is written by the city or the local district and the state. When it comes to criminal justice and the criminal legal system, so many of the people who are locked up currently were done so under state law and by officials who work locally and in the state. So we decided that a lot of the issues that we care about and that have a huge impact on a lot of the people's lives that we're fighting for are really locally determined. And so we decided to form Human Level because we wanted to have voices in local government who were focused on equity, focused on using the resources of the local government to actually empower people who had been marginalized, to listen to people in the community who hadn't been listened to before, and make sure that their needs were being met. So in all of these different structures that affect people's lives, like zoning, housing, the police, the criminal justice system, all education, all of these things that the local government has so much power in, making sure that the voices of marginalized people were actually being centered and listened to, and that policy and the implementation thereof was always considering their needs. And so we formed Human Level to recruit and hire fellows who would kind of infiltrate local government with the right motivations to help people who had been overlooked before. So that's Human Level, and then Free America was kind of the precursor to that, and it was focused directly on mass incarceration. And so when we formed Free America, like I said, I had been reading The New Jim Crow, I read Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson, and then we did what we called a listening and learning tour, where we just went around the country and talked to activists, people affected by the system, people in prison. We visited them, we visited juvenile detention centers, we talked to everybody, all the stakeholders, and then we started to formulate some policy ideas that we wanted to fight for with their consultation. And we started just going around the country advocating, whether it was in Louisiana to end the practice of non-unanimous juries. That was a really racist practice that could convict someone without a unanimous jury, and it was done specifically to make it easier to convict black people, so that even if there were a couple black folks on the jury, they wouldn't have the sway to exonerate anyone. They could still be found guilty. So we went to Florida and fought for the restoration of voting rights for people with felony convictions. We went to California and passed a proposition to, when I say we, I mean we were involved, but there were a lot of other activists involved as well, in fighting for these laws and changes in policy. In California, we were able to help reduce some crimes that should have been misdemeanors all along, reduce them from felony to misdemeanor, so that so many people weren't getting locked up for what should have been misdemeanors in the first place. So all around the country, we were finding ways to advocate for legislation that would help decarcerate and propose alternatives to prison that would be more edifying for the people involved in the system, but also for the entire community. And we continue to do that. We also have started to educate the public on the role of a district attorney in their community. And we were really at the forefront of helping to elect more progressive prosecutors in communities, prosecutors who were willing to think of alternatives to jail and prison when that was called for, prosecutors who were willing to hold police accountable when they, committed murder in the streets. And then we did all of these things just trying to get the nation closer and closer to being more just and more free, and we continue to do that work.
Let's talk presidential politics, because you've been very involved in.
I was told I'm not allowed to endorse on this stage. Is that correct?
Well, I think that ship sailed, right? You've been out there pretty aggressively campaigning for Kamala Harris, the Harris Walls ticket. You're not just sing it, right? You're out there actually campaigning.
Talking.
You're doing stuff. What
I did a really nice long interview with Club Shay Shay. If you want to check my Instagram, you can watch my. I had a really great talk with Shannon, and if you want to know more about all the things I'm talking about.
What compelled you to go all in on this one?
Well, I've been going all in, to be fair, on all the previous ones too. So I care a lot about this, and like I said, I grew up with an understanding of justice, an understanding of movements, but also an understanding of how our politicians have a role in bringing us closer to justice, and how having the right politicians in place enable these movements to be either successful or fail. And so I care about presidential politics, but also about the Senate and Congress and district attorneys. So I get involved in electoral politics from local all the way up to national.
In a couple of minutes, we're going to start taking your questions, which will be better than mine. Once the microphone stand goes out, feel free to start lining up. But before we get to that, if someone wants to put the mic stand, or if that's where it's going to be, you guys can start lining up. There's been a lot of talk lately. I'm fascinated by this, and we talked about this the other day in our call. There's this narrative out there, someone who has spent your life advocating for the black community. There's a narrative out there that the first black woman candidate for president of the United States is struggling relative to her predecessors as Democratic nominees with black men, particularly. That she's not pulling as much of that community as her predecessors have. And I'm curious, do you agree with that? You know, all the polls that are saying that, and what's your take on it?
Well, first of all, for some context, black men are going to vote for Kamala Harris more than any other demographic group in the nation, except for black women. So we will not be the reason she loses, if she loses. And I almost find it odd, I think I do find it odd, that this narrative has taken hold in the press when, at minimum, we're going to be supporting her around 80%. So 4 out of 5 black men are going to vote for her. And that is a massive margin for any candidate for any demographic group. And then if you go through all the other demographic groups, I'm like, shouldn't the question be asked of them? Why, when his former chief of staff says he's a fascist, when his former Secretary of Defense says he can't be trusted with power because he's a fascist, he wants to be a dictator, when his former vice president was threatened to be executed by his supporters and he won't support him, why aren't all of you voting for her 80%?
I've got a lot more questions. I reserve the right to sprinkle them in. But let's start over here. When you come up to the mic, when I point to you, tell us your name, where you're from, what you're studying, and please phrase your question in the form of a question.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. My name's Bilkisu Abdullah. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a senior in the College of Arts.
Are you voting in Pennsylvania?
I am. I sent it in yesterday. Yes, first presidential election that I get to vote in.
Congratulations.
I'm studying women and gender studies with a minor in medical humanities. I was lucky enough to be a contributor in Black Love Letters, so.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
That's a book that my publishing company published. She's holding one right there.
That's my copy, if you want to sign it.
Oh, there you go.
But thank you so much.
We're going to do volume 2, by the way.
Yes, I may have talked to Cole and Natalie, but we can talk later.
Yes.
I am personally the child of a large family. I have 7 siblings, and I constantly find myself motivated by the work I do for my younger siblings, the youngest being 6, turning 7 next week. I know that you have 4 beautiful children, and I wonder if specifically a reproductive justice framework has shaped the ways in which you see a better world, too.
Absolutely, and you know, you've probably heard me and my wife talk about our journey with fertility and losing a child and having to have an abortion to treat a miscarriage. And so the issue of reproductive justice is very personal to us. We also look at our daughters. We have 2 daughters, and we want a world where they have the same freedoms that their mother has. And we don't want to go backwards when it comes to the kind of freedom that they'll have to do something that's so personal and so intimate, which is make a decision about when and if they have children. It's such an important, like, fundamental thing that a woman should be able to decide for themselves, and we don't want our girls to not have that right when they grow up. And so, and we also see, when it comes to maternal health, how disproportionately women of color risk dying when they get pregnant, and there are all kinds of complications that come up in our system that are serious health risks for especially women of color in this country. And so when it comes to abortion policy, it's not merely just whether or not you have the child, it's whether or not you have the resources to access all the maternal health care that you might need, whatever your choices are in life. And so we care very deeply about this. We put our money where our mouth is as far as donating to abortion funds and to other organizations who are helping women who need the help. And then we, of course, advocate vociferously for the right of women to make their own decisions when it comes to these kinds of very fundamental, intimate issues.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, sir. Mr. Legend. Sorry. Sorry, I'm a big fan of yours, so pardon me if I stutter. My name is My name is Shlok Patak. I'm from East Brunswick, New Jersey. I'm a freshman in the college studying the Joint Public Policy program, and I was just wondering a little bit about myself. I was born in India. And I grew up there for about 8 or 9 months before I moved to the U.S. And so, as of right now, I'm on a green card status, so I can't actually vote in the election. But I still feel very strongly for, the candidates in the political process. And, hearing today about how involved you are in activism and all of these local issues, I was just wondering, how would you recommend for people right now that may not have the opportunity to vote or are waiting for the opportunity to vote to still express their voice and have themselves be heard?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. Everybody has a voice, everybody can speak out, but also there's ways to volunteer that even if you're not an eligible voter, you can phone bank, you can knock on doors, you can make a trip over to a swing state nearby.
Do you have one in mind?
Pennsylvania's very close. And you can knock on doors and help persuade people who are on the fence some people are on the fence about voting, about the power that their vote has. And I think it's a very powerful testament that you're somebody who wishes they had that power, and you could go and say to someone, you know what, I wish I had the power that you have to go out there and have my voice heard in a way that will have an impact when it comes to this election. So use that voice and use that power. So I think you have the ability to volunteer in a way that can be really meaningful. So I would suggest that you do that.
Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. I mean, Mr. Legend, sorry.
All right, next question.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. I believe a core trait of activism and advocacy is courage. Civil rights and social justice movements are often not popular. I think back to our civil rights movement in the 60s, spearheaded by Dr. King and Malcolm X, which was heavily policed and unpopular amongst the general American public. I see these parallels in movements today, such as the Black Lives Matter movement and the fight for a free Palestine. When was the time that you felt scared to challenge the status quo, and how did you overcome that discomfort?
Thank you. I won't say that I've felt scared, honestly. I feel like I've just been fueled by reading about these great leaders who inspired me and came before me, and knowing what they went through to fight for our freedoms and for justice. And then I feel like when I speak out, I'm speaking from a place of love and empathy and care for humanity. And I feel like I can defend what I'm going to say, and it makes me unafraid to say it.
Thank you.
But I just want us to be aware that it may become harder and more dangerous for us to say these things if the wrong person gets power in this country. So I don't want to underestimate the risk that it might take to speak up in the future. When someone wants to be a fascist, when someone wants to shoot protesters, he's made it explicit that he would like to shoot protesters he doesn't agree with. He's told his chief of staff, he's told his secretary of defense, he's told his joint chair, whoever the head of the military is, chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. He's told them he would like to shoot protesters. We haven't seen that. That's a new thing for this country, that idea that he could go out and shoot protesters. And so we need to be clear about the sense of urgency we should feel. And I have to say, when I watch the press talk about this election, it's very odd, because when those are the choices, you don't just talk about it like a normal horse race. Like, I need some urgency, okay? And some clarity with what the choices are. Like, these two things are not on equal planes. When somebody's talking about shooting protesters, admiring Hitler, admiring dictators, admiring fascism, like, this is not a normal race. Anyway, continue.
All right, let's take the next question.
Hello, Mr. Legend. My mom loves you. She's going to freak out when she hears that I go to ask you a question.
I'm a hit with the moms.
My name is Melad. I am a first-year graduate student in the government department. I'm from Nairobi, so I'm an international student. So I also can't vote in this election, even though I'm sure Donald Trump thinks that I am. My question had to do with, you talked about how growing up you kind of associated entertainment and music with activism because of the kind of people that inspired you. But I feel like recently a lot of celebrities have been coming under fire for kind of not being politically active enough and like using their platform and voice enough. How do you feel about the state of the entertainment industry in regard to its like relation to political activism? Do you feel like your peers are like using their voices in the way that you would wish?
I'm of two minds about this. Part of me is like, these are the artists I looked up to. These are the artists that inspired me and made me want to use my art and my platform to do what I do. But I also am aware that a lot of my fellow artists aren't as interested or informed or ready to have the kind of conversations that I'm ready to have. And so I don't expect everyone to be as passionate about it as I am. And frankly, like, if they're not doing the work, not doing any understanding of what's going on, if they're not talking to activists like I am, if they're not preparing themselves in a way to really be effective advocates, then maybe they just don't need to do that. Focus on their music, focus on whatever, and be great at that. I also think that we live in a different time. Not to say that politics doesn't affect us now, it does, it really does. And I want people to feel a sense of urgency about it. But also during that time, the 60s and 70s, there was the Vietnam War. And there's something very specific about that era, which was the draft. And the draft made that era a time where every young person could have been called to fight in a war that they didn't believe in. And I think that gave them a heightened sense of the personal stakes for politics that I don't think this generation has. My generation doesn't, your generation doesn't. And I'm not pining for the days when we had the draft, but I'm just saying a side effect of us not all having that sense of shared urgency in youth culture is probably contributing to fewer people being passionate about politics.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. All right, next.
Hi, my name is Emma Garcia. I'm a Mexican American currently living in Mexico, so this is my first election in both countries. And something I have seen about both of these is kind of the dissonance in the younger generations. And so as a person who has constantly spoken about not only using your platform for advocacy, but also kind of like using your voice to speak on behalf of issues you are very interested in and you consider relevant, what would you say to younger generations who are not only trying to find their voice, but then to use this in an environment where they might not always be heard or where they're constantly confronted with some sort of opposition? This is to say, individuals in communities where they might be set aside for their beliefs, or like they might consider themselves standing alone.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think part of it is finding your tribe, because there's somebody out there who agrees with you and who's ready to fight with you and to work with you and to support you and buttress you. So I think sometimes if you don't feel like you're among people that are ready to do that with you, you've got to find them. And then secondly, I think sometimes people are trying to figure out what to get involved with. And I think part of that involves thinking about what you feel passionate about, what you feel personal connection to, what's your way into that issue that makes you feel this extra passion and personal connection to it, and then what has your education and your expertise prepared you to be involved in, and then connect all that together, and then find the tribe around you that'll help support you and buttress you as you go into that.
Thank you. I forgot to mention, I'm a freshman in the SFS, either studying STIA or international politics.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Tasneem. I'm a freshman in the SFS. I was wondering, do you think there's greater election reform needed, given that candidates can win the popular vote but not the Electoral College? And the second part of my question is, like, I'm not sure if I'm able to ask this, but are you able to sing a part of your songs?
I was told I couldn't ask it, so I'm so glad you did.
I have a very elaborate warming up process before I sing anywhere, and I have yet to do that, so I'm not making any promises about singing. But how fucked up is it that we have to depend on 7 swing states to elect our president? Like, it's crazy. The fact that we met somebody from Pennsylvania and we're like, oh, your vote matters, and then nobody else's does if they don't live in those 7 states is insane. So yeah, get rid of the Electoral College. Popular vote can elect every other position in America except president. Like your senator, they're voted on, they win the popular vote, they win. Every other position, we trust the popular vote. Let's do the same for president. It's hard to accomplish because our Constitution makes it extremely difficult to amend anything, and it would take, I don't know how we could even accomplish it, because people have been thinking about it and trying it for a while, but clearly if we were sane in this moment, we would change the Constitution to say, hey, whoever gets the most votes, whoever convinces the most Americans to elect them to the presidency should be the president. So yeah, here we are.
Hi, John Legend. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm Felice. I'm doing computer science here. I'm a freshman. And my question for you is, how do you stay motivated to continue fighting for what you believe in? Because I'm not sure about everyone, but I know for me, as a young activist, it gets hard to continue fighting, especially when we see the same things happening over and over and over again. So what fuels you?
Well, I'm fueled, one, by staying proximate to people who are affected by these issues. When I hear their stories, when I look into their eyes, it renews my passion. I went to visit some local jails in New Orleans recently, and if I needed any reminder why I continue to fight for this, I was reminded by speaking to the folks who were in jail in our most incarcerated state in the country, which makes them the most incarcerated, political unit in the world, because we're the most incarcerated country in the world, and Louisiana and I believe Mississippi are usually fighting back and forth for who's going to be number one in incarcerating people. And then I saw the direct connection. There's a new museum that they dedicated to showing the direct connection between slavery and the current jail and prison system in Louisiana. And I saw how stark and clear that connection is, and I was able to speak to and look into the eyes of people who are affected by it every single day. And if I needed any extra motivation, that was my motivation. But also, I don't think it's enough to see all the bad. You have to be fueled by hope as well. And I believe it was Mariam Kaba that said, hope should be your strategy. It should motivate you and push you to do the work. I think you have to have that combination of that sense of urgency, of seeing the problem up close, humanizing the problem up close, and then helping that fuel your passion. But also you need some optimism and hope that you're going to be able to actually make a difference. And sometimes hope is fueled by those little wins that we get. And we've gotten some wins in the criminal justice movement. When it comes to decarceration, when it comes to changing laws, when it comes to getting certain people elected that are more progressive minded, some of those changes we fought pretty hard for, and they actually have made a difference in people's lives. And so don't ignore those, pay attention to those wins, celebrate those wins, and use them as fuel to keep you going.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Ronnie. I'm a junior studying international politics with a minor in journalism. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, so I definitely relate to having Dr. King as a strong mentor and figure in my life. And my question is about the issue of political polarization. I think a lot of us in this room and in this generation have grown up in an era where you can't have a conversation about politics without yelling at each other. And personally, by speaking with my friends and some students I know that aren't voting, it's honestly because of this polarization, because there's a stigma about politics, and this kind of scares them away from getting involved in politics. So I just wanted to get your take on how big of political polarization is in this election, and maybe some strategies, maybe on both the right and the left, if you could, about how to mitigate this. Thank you.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, I sometimes, see the commentary online, and it feels like people are existing in two different universes. And a lot of the reason why, I think, is the way that media is structured now. You can be, the algorithms and your own personal choices can kind of send you down a rabbit hole where you're only getting things that kind of reinforce your views or take you down a certain rabbit hole and shelter you from any factual information that might disturb your point of view and make you think twice about something because you're so ensconced in this media bubble that tells you that your framing is right, your facts are right, even if they're not, and so I feel like a lot of people are often not even choosing to, but kind of being led in a direction where they're not hearing the truth anymore. And they're in a bubble that only reinforces whatever their ideological priors are. And it's very frustrating. And I think that has helped lead to this, what some people call polarization, what some people call calcification, where it's like people become hardened in their views and unable to be convinced to kind of go to the other side. And I worry that it's only getting worse because we have, a person who bought Twitter and decided to make it a disinformation machine. Like it's a machine of disinformation that he leads. Like he personally is a disinformation machine. And so when we have some of our leading social media outlets being explicitly purposefully rooting for people to know things that are not true so they can go in a certain ideological direction, it's scary. And I don't know how we fix it. I know all of us who care about journalism should support, subscribe, pay for journalism, because we need people who are truth tellers, who are fact-checked, who have editorial standards. We need them out there telling the truth about what's going on in our world.
But I want to pull on this thread just a little bit, though, because I think it's really interesting. You know, so much we hear, you talked earlier about finding your tribe, right? And too often our politics feels like tribal warfare, frankly. And you hear different groups saying, the other side doesn't see me, they don't hear me, they don't get me. People in the heartland think that the coastal elites overlook them and dismiss them. People from the coast and the big cities say, oh, rural America doesn't understand us. You're from Springfield, Ohio. Mm-hmm. Springfield has been at the center of some of this, right? Of this polarized culture war. And I'm just curious how your own upbringing, coming from that community, helps you better understand folks from different walks of life in different parts of the country.
I was just in Springfield, literally yesterday, and I sat in a Haitian restaurant and ate food with a friend of mine who's a Haitian American artist, and we made a song together. We made a song together before all this controversy, but it's going to come out fairly soon. We decided to collaborate with another Haitian vocalist and put this song out in the near future that we had collaborated on. And he had texted me how grateful he was that I said something about what was going on in my hometown. If you haven't seen it, go to my Instagram, and I did like a 5-minute video about what was going on in my hometown and the intentional poisonous disinformation that was being put out by the former president and his vice presidential running mate about what was happening in Springfield. And I feel like so much of what I've seen in Springfield is very heartening about our ability to get along with each other, hear each other. We have a Republican mayor in Springfield. We have a Republican governor in the state of Ohio who's actually from our area in Ohio. And both of them have done what they could to turn the temperature down, to tell the truth and fact check people from their own party who are spreading lies about the Haitian immigrants in our community, and remind everyone that the reason that we got over 10,000 Haitian immigrants into Springfield, who are all legal immigrants with documented status, was because of a growth story. This is a positive story in our community. Because of the recent boom in manufacturing in the United States, a community that had been shrinking, some would say withering. It was at its peak 80,000 people, and then at its nadir, like 58,000 people. Got an influx of new opportunities, jobs, opportunities, new companies that were relocating there, and this is a great thing. And because of that, immigrants wanted to come and work there, and there were jobs available for them. All the employers, so happy. They feel like these immigrants come with a work ethic and a sense of urgency and desire to live the American dream, and they're great employees, they're great neighbors. They actually commit less crime than native-born people, and the people of Springfield, by and large, have done what they could to be welcoming and accommodating for their new neighbors. And this is a success story. And it's a Republican-run city in a Republican-run state. So it just shows me that on a local level, we can find ways to be good neighbors with each other, communicate with each other, and tell the truth to each other. People in Springfield know that there aren't a bunch of Haitians eating cats and dogs, but the national media was poisoned by what President Trump said in the debate and what Senator Vance said, spreading disinformation. And so that disinformation is out there, and it's really unfortunate, but I do believe that Springfield also tells us a hopeful story about our ability to get along with our neighbors, to be welcoming to immigrants, and perpetuate the American dream.
Thanks. All right.
Hi, my name is Frances. I'm studying government in the college. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. Yes, I have voted, don't worry. And my
You count. Some of us don't count, you count.
Thank you. My question is, in a world that's like plagued by misinformation, political polarization, and just like a lack of unity and change, how do you recommend people set boundaries for themselves to take care of themselves when they're not seeing that change, and ways they can lean on their community so that they can be encouraged to still fight?
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I think a lot of times we get fatigued, we get stressed, distressed by what's going on in the world. And I don't want us to turn off our empathy, but I do want us to make sure we practice some self-care and some, care for our own psyches, care for our own bodies and our own health. And I think it's important to take that time for yourself, for your mental health and for your physical health, so you don't get worn down by the fight, and by all the bad news that is out there. And like I said, for all the bad news out there, I think there is a lot of good news, and we need to celebrate the wins as well, and not get bogged down by when things aren't going exactly the way we want them. But also, we need to take some moments maybe to turn off our phones and turn off the news and just allow ourselves to restore ourselves, our mental health and our physical health.
Thanks. We are coming up on the end of our time, so I'm sorry for those of you in line, but John keeps telling you to check out his Instagram, so maybe you can just send him your questions there. I want to close with a question, though. This is the Know Your Power series. 15-year-old John knew his power. Right? What you wrote in that.
Sort of. He had an idea.
An idea, right? You're sitting in a hall with a lot of ambitious young change makers. But a lot of people are still trying to figure out what their power is. What's your advice to help people figure that out for themselves as they begin their own journeys?
Well, I think I want everybody to be open, to be empathetic, and also remember that so much of the change that you want to see in the world, as we've learned, as my organization has learned, happens in communities all over the country and all over the world. So we're in the seat of power in the United States right now, a federal power, and the temptation may be to only focus on what's happening here in Washington, D.C., but just remember there's so many ways for you to make a difference and to get the kind of wins that we want all over the country, all over the world, in communities who need you, who need your brain power, your empathy, your care, your ingenuity. All of that could be of use in so many different places, not just here in DC. So I want you to think globally and locally in that sense. So think about all the different places you could go, all the different places where your talents could be useful, and realize that there's more to power, there's more to you being involved, there's more to you making a difference than what's happening in this city.
I want to thank all of you for spending part of your evening with us, but John, I want to thank you for coming and sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great.